Hey guys, tonight we journey into a time when the world was cloaked in shadows, figuratively and literally. You're walking down a narrow, cobblestone alleyway in a medieval European town. The year is somewhere around 1348, and the world is unraveling around you. One blackened lymph node at a time. The sun, when it shows its face, barely cuts through the soot hanging in the air. You step over a fresh pile of something you hope is just rotting cabbage. And a rat the size of a cat makes eye contact before scurrying into a churchyard. This is a world where soap is suspicious, fresh air is feared, and if you sneeze too hard, someone might try to bury you just in case. Welcome to the Black Death. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll learn why everyone reeked while you go. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I always love seeing who's still awake. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along through the muddy main road, your boots squelching with each step. The town is unnervingly quiet, save for the occasional bark of a dog or clanging of a blacksmith's hammer. You pass a wooden sign crudely painted with a red X on someone's door, a sign that no one in that household is breathing anymore. The air is thick, not just with dread, but with something riper. The scent is a mix of old meat, damp wool, sour milk, and something metallic you can't quite place. Your eyes water slightly, but you're starting to get used to it. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were constantly that smelly, or if the worst stench only arrived when the plague did. But you're here now, and either way, it's assaulting your nostrils like an angry tavern bouncer. You duck into a market stall to get out of the drizzle. The vendor, missing 2 teeth, 1 eye, and apparently his sense of smell, is selling something that looks like a pastry but smells like fish and burnt honey. You politely decline. As you pass a group of townsfolk murmuring prayers and waving sprigs of rosemary under their noses, it becomes clear that nobody really understands what's causing the deaths. Some blame the stars, others blame the Jews, a few very determined men blame cats. So naturally, people start killing cats, which only makes the rat problem worse. Which, if you're following the disease math here, really backfires. You reach the town fountain, more decorative than useful, since the water is currently brown and has a pigeon floating upside down in it. But this is also where people wash their faces, fill their jugs, and sometimes drink, if they're feeling optimistic. A woman nearby is scrubbing her hands with vinegar and ash. She says it keeps away the vapors. You consider asking what vapors, but decide you'd rather not know. She offers you a sniff of her pouch of dried herbs. It smells like thyme, rosemary, and desperation. You pass by a notice nailed to a wooden post. No gathering in groups. Below that, God is angry. Bathe not. Below that, a crude drawing of someone vomiting. A group of children are playing Dead Man's Ditch, a game where one kid lies still while the others pretend to bury him in imaginary dirt. You watch, feeling uneasy. One of the kids actually sneezes, and the others run away screaming, "You're cursed!" Then they laugh. Kids are resilient like that, or maybe just weird. You make your way toward a small apothecary shop that smells of mold and crushed petals. Inside, rows of dried roots and jars of questionable color line the shelves. The apothecary is a small, hunched man who looks like he's been alive since Roman times. He tries to sell you a mixture of rose oil, sheep's bladder, and powdered emerald. He claims it freshens the breath and prevents facial rotting. You pass. He also offers a hygiene tip. Don't bathe. Just gently wipe your body down with wine-soaked cloth and avoid standing near toads. Apparently, toads attract evil. The door slams shut behind you with a creak, and as you step back into the street, you notice something unnerving. Silence again. The plague has emptied many homes. You peek through an open window and see a single bowl of soup still steaming on the table, untouched. No sign of the people who once lived there. A cart trundles past, pulled by a horse that looks like it's been through 3 wars. The cart is piled with linen-wrapped bodies. A man with a bell walks beside it, calling out, "Bring out your dead." It's not just a phrase. It's a job. You don't make eye contact. Someone taps your shoulder. It's an old nun offering you a rag soaked in vinegar. "Hold this to your face," she says kindly. The smell keeps the sickness from crawling up your nose. You nod and obey, though it mostly makes your eyes burn. Still, the intention is sweet. You follow her to a small chapel, where the sick are laid out on straw beds. The air inside is a cocktail of incense, sweat, and damp wood. Some people moan softly. Others are completely still. A few are praying. One is whispering that he saw death walk down the road that morning, wearing a black hood and smiling. Historians still debate whether the plague originated from the east via trade routes or emerged from unsanitary European cities. But wherever it came from, it's here now, and no one seems to know what to do about it, besides avoiding fresh air and blaming fruit vendors. Back outside, the wind picks up. It carries with it the scent of wood smoke, sewage, and something floral that you hope is lavender. A cat darts across your path and disappears into a broken cart. You wonder how long it'll survive. You find a quiet spot by a crumbling stone wall. Pull your hood low and watch the flickering lanterns across town. Somewhere, someone is singing. It's soft and sad, like a lullaby for a world slipping away. And yet, you're still here, not clean, not safe, but still breathing, which in this town puts you ahead of most people. You wake to the sound of hooves clattering on stone. Morning light leaks through the grime-covered clouds, casting everything in a pale, sickly hue. The dampness hasn't left the air. If anything, it's gotten worse overnight. And the smell? Stronger. You sniff the collar of your tunic and wince. You smell like smoked onions and something vaguely medieval. This is the daily reality of hygiene in plague-ridden Europe. You're not alone in your funk. Everyone around you is swimming in the same stew of odours, some trying harder than others to mask it. But the truth is simple. You smell like the century you're in. And the 14th century. Let's just say it's not a time known for its bouquet. A butcher trudges by, his apron stained with layers of something once alive. He's chewing garlic, lots of it. Garlic is thought to ward off evil spirits and illness. More importantly, it masks the stench of spoiled meat and sweat. Everyone here stinks, but not everyone stinks confidently. You pass a couple in what might be their Sunday best. She smells faintly of goat tallow soap and dried lavender. He, on the other hand, has apparently bathed in ale and regret. She sprinkles something onto her skin from a small pouch. It's rosemary, crushed fine. It doesn't help much, but she's trying. Historians still argue whether garlic and rosemary were actually believed to have real antibacterial properties, or were just part of a grand tradition of throwing herbs at problems until they went away. But either way, it's what people clung to when death hovered outside the door. You duck into a nearby alehouse. The floor is covered in straw, supposedly to absorb spills, but really, it just collects more smells. The air is heavy with yeast, smoke, and unwashed humanity. A man at the next table is rubbing a clove of garlic on his armpits. No one bats an eye. The tavern keeper is unusually clean, or at least less filthy. He offers you a warm drink and some boiled barley. Keep your insides warm and your feet dry, he says. The plague hates warmth. That's probably not true. But in times like these, superstition is more comforting than science. You sip the drink. It's bitter, possibly vinegar-based, possibly wine that's gone to war and lost. Still, it's safer than water. You overhear two men arguing over whether the plague is caused by miasma, bad air, or divine punishment. One of them pulls out a satchel of dried herbs and starts wafting them around the room like a medieval air freshener. Better rosemary than repentance, he mutters. Outside again. The sun has broken through, just slightly. It reveals the grime caked onto buildings, the moss growing between every brick. People are out in the streets, trying to sell goods that no one wants. A young girl offers you a bundle of mint leaves. For your mouth, she says shyly. Makes kisses smell nice. You thank her and take one. It's actually refreshing. You chew it slowly, wondering how many people had mint as part of their hygiene routine. Turns out, quite a few. While they didn't have toothpaste, per se, people did chew herbs to mask mouth odor, sometimes mixed with wine, sometimes with vinegar, occasionally with powdered oyster shell, if they were feeling fancy. Still, you wouldn't describe the average medieval breath as pleasant. Mint only gets you so far when your dental hygiene includes drinking from lead cups and occasional tooth extractions performed by someone also offering haircuts. A priest passes by, swinging a censer full of incense. The cloud it emits is thick, fragrant, and almost pleasant. He tells you it helps keep away bad spirits and, if inhaled deeply enough, headaches. You try not to think about what that's masking. Then you smell something worse. You follow the scent down a side street and come upon a group of tanners at work. Leather must be made, even during a plague. But the process? It involves urine, lots of it, and quicklime, and something that might be pigeon droppings. You don't get too close. One of the tanners wipes his hands on his apron and offers you a bit of stiffener, a paste made of animal brains and ash. Keeps the skin supple, he says. You're not sure whether he means his leather or his face. You decline. He shrugs. At least I don't smell like a fishmonger, he mutters. Which is fair. It's almost humorous. The lengths people go to try and smell better, or at least different. A noble woman passing by is wafting a handkerchief in front of her nose. It's embroidered with silk thread and soaked in rose water. That square of cloth is her last line of defense between her sensitive nose and the medieval world. A quirky fact you learn from a passing merchant. Some people would carry oranges stuffed with cloves, called pomanders, and wear them on chains around their necks. They looked stylish and smelled tolerable, which was a win in this era. You look down at yourself. Your tunic is stained with mud and who knows what. Your boots have acquired a permanent squelch. You feel itchy in places you're afraid to investigate. A woman nearby is boiling rags. She tells you it's to kill plague gremlins. She's half right. Boiling cloth does help kill bacteria, even if she doesn't quite know what bacteria are. Historians still debate how effective these rudimentary cleansing methods were. But hey, she's trying. Cheese. As the sun begins to dip again, you sit near a small fountain, one that still runs, barely. You splash some water on your face, hoping it's less disease-laden than it looks. A child nearby giggles and does the same. Her mother yells at her to stop. "That's death water," she warns. You quickly wipe your hands on your tunic. A bell tolls in the distance. Another day, another cart of the dead. But somehow, life goes on. And as you sit there, smelling like garlic, mint, and something you hope isn't rotting turnip, you start to understand why hygiene wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about hope. A tiny, aromatic shield between yourself and the chaos closing in. You breathe in the scent of rosemary one more time. It's not soap, but it'll do. The bell keeps tolling in the distance. Long, low notes that seem to stretch across the rooftops and settle into your bones. You've grown used to it, oddly enough. That steady gong doesn't just mark death. It marks time. Time in a world that doesn't feel the same anymore. As the evening settles in and the shadows stretch longer across the narrow streets, you start to notice something strange. People are lighting fires, not for warmth, necessarily, but in metal braziers placed on street corners, in doorways, even inside their homes. The air fills with smoke, not just from wood, but from burning herbs, incense, and in some cases, old shoes. A man in a wide hat walks past you, dragging a small cart stacked with dried rosemary, sage, and juniper branches. "Smoke cleans the air," he says, "kills the sickness." You catch the acrid, herbal scent as he tosses a bundle into a brazier and fans the flames. The smoke swirls upward, thick and fragrant. You cough. "Good for the lungs," he adds, which seems questionable. But who are you to argue? Historians still debate how widespread this fumigation practice really was. Some say it was limited to wealthier towns or organized by municipal councils, while others argue it became common even in poor districts, out of desperation more than science. What's not debated, people believed in it deeply. You follow the smoky trail to a side alley where a family is burning a pile of what looks like hay soaked in vinegar. The mother is chanting softly. She tells you it's a cleansing ritual. The mixture smells like salad dressing on fire. You politely nod and back away. A few doors down, a man invites you into what he calls a purifying chamber. Really, it's his bathhouse. You're not sure what's more surprising. The fact that there's a functioning bathhouse or that someone's willing to share it. He explains that the town physician, yes, they have one, recommended steam as a remedy, not for the plague directly, but for unclogging the humours. You strip down and enter the chamber, which is dimly lit and filled with aromatic steam. Lavender, maybe. Or thyme. The scent is pleasant enough to make you forget, momentarily, that you're half naked in a stranger's smoky hut. Your skin prickles from the heat. You can't tell if it's helping, but it feels like healing. Your host talks as he tends the coals. He shares that some towns banned steam baths out of fear they opened the pores, letting the plague in. Others, paradoxically, encouraged them to sweat the disease out. Historians still argue which theory had more influence, if any had real medical merit at all. The bathhouse isn't luxurious. There are no oils or soft towels, just buckets of tepid water, a rough cloth, and maybe a handful of soap if you're lucky. But here, in the fog and flickering light, you feel clean for the first time in days. Not modern clean, no cucumber mint body wash in sight, but cleaner than the streets outside. Afterward, you dry off with a rag that may have once been a tunic. You exit into the night air, steam still rising from your skin. You feel like a roasted root vegetable, but oddly renewed. A woman waiting outside the bathhouse eyes you. "You've got the glow," she says approvingly. "No sickness on you." You offer her your turn. She declines. "Not safe," she whispers. "Some say the steam spreads it." She crosses herself and hurries away. Later, you wander past a group gathered around a public well. They're arguing. One man is filling buckets, insisting the water is blessed. Another shouts that it's been poisoned by the sick. A third is rubbing salt along the edge of his bucket to purify it. You crouch beside them and dip a hand in. It's cold, refreshing, and just a little murky. You remember someone mentioning that many wells were near cesspits, and you suddenly don't feel so thirsty. To mask the flavour, or danger, people often mixed water with vinegar or wine. It didn't make it clean, exactly, but it made it palatable. The acidic bite of vinegar might have even killed a few bacteria, though no one back then could tell you how or why. Walking further, you find a monk handing out satchels of plague powder. He insists you sprinkle it under your bed and burn a pinch at sunset. The ingredients: crushed camphor, rose petals, and powdered myrrh. Smells like a perfume counter at a very haunted apothecary. The monk shares a fringe belief that certain smells attract angels, who then drive away demons and disease. It's poetic, if not exactly effective. You glance down at your fingernails, caked in dirt. No soap in sight. So you do what many people did. You rub them clean with a bit of sand. It scratches, but it works. Sort of. A child nearby shows you how she cleans her teeth, with a frayed stick chewed into bristles. She giggles as she scrapes at her molars. You try it. It's rustic. Effective, though. That's medieval ingenuity. When in doubt, chew a tree. You pass a beggar with what appears to be a pouch of mint, fennel, and caraway hanging from his neck. He swears it saved his life. You're not sure from what. You wish him well. A strange scene unfolds just ahead. A man is standing in the middle of the square, yelling that he's too clean to get sick. He's been bathing in vinegar daily, scrubbing with ash and nettles. His skin is red and raw. You admire his commitment, if not his logic. Someone tosses him a tomato. He dodges it. "Which fruit?" he shouts. That tracks. As the night deepens and the moon begins to rise, the smells of the city soften a little. Fires have dulled the sharper odours. Incense hangs like a dream in the air. You pass by a small church, where a nun is gently sweeping the stones with a lavender-dipped broom. She doesn't speak, just nods at you kindly. Her robe is patched, but spotless. She moves with deliberate care. You wonder how much of that cleanliness is ritual, and how much is resistance. You pause beneath an archway. The city breathes around you, musty, smoky, strangely beautiful. You lean back, your body still tingling from the steam bath, your nose full of herbs and wood smoke. And you realize that in this world, hygiene isn't just about cleanliness, it's about control. In a time when so little is understood, when disease moves like a shadow, and hope thins with every toll of the bell, washing, scrubbing, burning herbs, they're all tiny acts of defiance. You breathe in, still some garlic in there, but less fear. You wake up stiff and slightly smoky, curled beside the edge of a crumbling wall where you must have nodded off. The city has begun to stir again, if that's the right word for it. There's no real bustle, just the low rustle of people cautiously emerging from homes, shops, and makeshift shelters. Morning, in plague time, is more of a soft reset than a true beginning. You rise slowly, bones cracking, and glance around. There's a woman scrubbing her doorstep with salt water. Her face is set in grim determination. She glances at you briefly before pouring another bucket down and rubbing it in with a straw brush. "Keeps the bad humours away," she mutters. You nod respectfully. She might not be a doctor, but at least she's trying. You wander onward and find yourself approaching a larger house with a garland of herbs strung across the doorframe. Rosemary, sage, and something you can't quite identify. Maybe marjoram or something more obscure. The household clearly believes in the power of plants. A servant steps out and splashes the ground with wine before stepping into the street. You don't ask. This practice of door scrubbing, burning, salting, and wreath hanging wasn't isolated. In many cities, it became a standard part of daily cleaning, though historians still debate whether it was religious ritual, folk magic, or proto-science, probably some of each. Either way, it was the best most people could manage in a world that didn't yet have germ theory. You spot a child chasing a rat with a stick. He's fast, but the rat is faster. They disappear under a stack of wood, and you feel your stomach twist slightly. You've seen enough by now to know what rats might mean. But at this moment in time, most people don't know. Some suspect rats, others blame foreigners, or stars, or bad air. The child's mother sees you looking and says proudly, "He keeps the vermin off our street." You smile and offer a quiet, "Good luck." She hands you a piece of stale bread wrapped in cloth. You take it. Who turns down bread? And continue your walk. You pass a row of public latrines, little more than wooden seats over a pit. Someone's tried to keep them clean. Lavender bundles tied to the corners, a bucket of ash nearby. The smell, however, is doing its own thing. Toilet hygiene in the plague era is not for the faint-hearted. In many places, human waste simply gets dumped into rivers, ditches, or even alleyways. Some cities have regulations against this, rules about latrine placement and waste disposal, but enforcement is lax. You think about how many people must have gotten sick simply because of where their neighbours emptied their chamber pots. A woman outside a nearby inn is boiling rags in a massive pot. Linens must be purified, she tells you, or burned. You peer into the water. It's grey, cloudy, flecked with soap and grime. The steam carries the sharp tang of lye. "Lost my husband and 2 sons," she adds, not looking at you. "Still have guests." She goes back to stirring. The motion is mechanical. You want to say something comforting, but nothing feels right, so you just nod and keep moving. You pass a man with scabs on his arms, scrubbing them raw with vinegar. It hurts to watch. You consider stopping him, but his eyes are far away. He's whispering something about purification, about being clean enough for heaven. Whether it's a last-ditch effort at healing or a desperate ritual for salvation, you can't tell. Scholars still argue whether this obsession with bodily cleansing was a psychological survival strategy or a practical attempt to curb disease. Either way, it's everywhere. In a world where you can't control what's coming through the door, you cling to what you can scrub, sweep, or scald. You find a public fountain still running, miracle enough, and wash your hands. A boy nearby offers you a pinch of dried mint. "For the mouth," he says. You chew it politely. It's bitter, but not unpleasant. A group of women are gathered near the fountain, trading soaps. Yes, soaps. Bars of soft grey or greenish lumps made from lard and ash, sometimes mixed with herbs. One woman has a bar shaped like a heart. "From Avignon," she says proudly. A priest blessed it. Soap wasn't rare in medieval Europe. though it varied wildly in quality and scent, in places like Marseille and Naples. Soap making was practically an art form. In other places, it was more like a smelly side hustle. Still, people tried. They made what they could, traded what they had, and believed fiercely in its power, even if they didn't fully understand how it worked. The crowd parts suddenly as a cart rolls by. Two men in heavy robes are hauling something covered in a sheet. No one looks too closely. You don't either. But the sheet is damp, and you know. One of the women crosses herself and presses her soap to her nose. Back on the street, a tailor is airing out his fabrics in the sun. "Can't be too careful," he says. Sunlight cleanses. He flaps a tunic like a bedsheet. You watch the dust rise. It's not just a superstition, really. Sunlight does have antiseptic properties. UV rays can kill bacteria. But of course, they didn't know that. What they knew was this. Fresh air felt safer. Rooms that smelled sweet seemed healthier. Stale air was feared. You find yourself climbing a staircase toward a modest home with windows flung open. Inside, a woman is waving a fan over a bowl of lemons. She tells you her cousin in Italy said citrus drives away plague air. And cats, she adds, nodding to the two lounging in the windowsill. Cats chase evil. You pet one of the cats. It purrs. You feel marginally safer. There's a tavern nearby still operating. Somehow. You walk past its open door and catch a glimpse of a man mopping the floor with something that smells like garlic, beer, and pine. You make a mental note to stay away from medieval mop cocktails. As the sun begins to set, you wander back toward the church you passed last night. The nun is still there, sweeping slowly. This time, she hums as she works. The stones are spotless. She stops and hands you a small bundle of herbs. "For your pillow," she says. "Sweet dreams keep the sickness away." You thank her and press the bundle to your chest. It smells like safety, even if it's just superstition. Maybe that's enough. You pass under the arch again and look out over the street. People are still trying. Scrubbing doorsteps, lighting fires, washing their hands in vinegar or soap or nothing at all. Each little act, a protest against despair. The bell tolls again. But now, instead of sounding like an ending, it almost sounds like punctuation, not final, but steady. A breath, a rhythm. You follow its echo into the deepening night. You sit on the stone edge of a small square as night thickens and the world hushes once again. The stars prick through a foggy sky, and somewhere nearby, someone is burning juniper branches. The sharp, peppery smoke carries on the breeze. You inhale. Not exactly pleasant, but not terrible either. In a way, it's cleaner than the air from earlier. That is, if you ignore the hint of ash and rot. You can hear the faint squelch of wooden sandals over mud as two people approach the square, each carrying a lantern. They don't see you in the shadows. One of them, a woman in a pale cloak, kneels and begins to scoop soil from the edge of the square with her hands. The other, younger, opens a pouch and pours something in, a mix of crushed eggshells, sage, and what smells like urine. They whisper something, cover it up, and hurry off again. You blink. Some kind of folk ritual? A purification rite? Historians still debate whether these nightly plantings were meant to appease spirits, ward off disease, or simply serve as symbolic gestures of control in a collapsing world. But whatever it meant, it was personal. And in plague-ridden towns, private magic often meant more than public medicine. You stand slowly and head toward the outskirts, away from the city's congested heart. Here, the air opens up, less clotted by people and pestilence. You hear a rooster crow. Yes, at night. It happens. Maybe it's confused. You don't blame it. A few minutes' walk takes you to a small bathhouse, somehow still functioning. The stone building is warm with steam, lit from within by oil lamps. A wooden sign leans half crooked. 2 pence for hot, 1 for cold. You pause, intrigued. In plague years, bathhouses became controversial. Many shut down, as fears spread that heat and humidity opened the pores and let the plague in. Others insisted bathing was essential, scrubbing the skin to drive out bad humors. You step inside. The place is nearly empty. A middle-aged man is soaking alone, arms out, eyes closed. The attendant nods to you and motions toward a corner bench. You sit, and he pours water over your hands. It's not a full bath, but it's something. He offers you a scrap of soap, sharp-smelling and pitted like cheese, and you rub it in. Your fingers are sore from yesterday's walking, your palms calloused from clutching a blanket. And now this moment of warmth feels luxurious. You lean back, letting your mind wander. Someone begins humming a tune behind the screen. It's a lullaby. Familiar, gentle, almost sacred. The kind of song people sing to dying children and frightened elders. Not the kind of song you expect here, in this fog of steam and vinegar-scented cloth. But that's the thing about plague time. Places shift, meaning twists. A bathhouse becomes a chapel. A lullaby becomes a warding charm. The attendant offers you a rag soaked in rosemary water. You place it over your face, and for a few breaths, the scent blocks out everything else. Then he's back, gently tapping your shoulder. "We close at moonrise," he says. You nod, gather yourself, and step into the cool night again. The temperature drop hits like a slap. Your skin, still damp, contracts instantly. You draw your blanket tighter and walk. Along a narrow lane, you spot a wooden sign with a painted comb and shears. A barber surgeon shop. It's closed now, but earlier in the day, you noticed a line of people waiting outside. Bloodletting, tooth pulling, boil lancing. These were the specialties of barber surgeons. The not-quite doctors who blended grooming with primitive medical care. The tools hang visibly behind the shuttered window. Curved knives, a bristle brush, tongs, and something that looks like a cheese cutter. You shiver. These barber surgeons weren't necessarily cruel or ignorant. Many were well respected, but they worked without anesthesia, antiseptic, or much understanding of infection. It was grit, guts, and guesswork. The fact that they operated in the same space they shaved beards says something. Not quite what, but something. You peek around the corner and see a bucket of leeches bobbing gently beside the door. Yes, leeches. Still widely used. Still believed to balance humors and extract illness. You move on before one of them gets any ideas. Ahead, a group of monks are kneeling outside a chapel, heads bowed in silent prayer. You approach slowly, quietly. They don't move, except to sway slightly with the wind. Their robes ripple like smoke. One of them has placed a jar of honey beside him. You don't question it. Honey was prized in the medieval world, not just as food, but as medicine, applied to wounds, added to tinctures, even smeared across doorways as a sweet offering to divine forces. Whether you believed in science, superstition, or somewhere in between, honey was hope in a jar. One monk lifts his head and opens his eyes. He sees you and offers a nod, then turns back to the ground. That's blessing enough. You wander deeper into the quiet, past a tanner's hut that reeks of decay, past a burned-out bakery with soot still clinging to its stones, past a bridge with boards missing in the middle. You tiptoe across. You find yourself in a field, just beyond the town. The moon has risen, casting silver over the grass. Someone has left a line of clothing draped over the hedges, probably to air them out. You sniff. They smell like smoke and thyme. Out here, the sky feels bigger. The air smells clearer. Maybe cleaner isn't the word, but less hopeless. Somehow. You lay on the grass for a moment and stare at the stars. You imagine what cleanliness would feel like in this time. Not sterile, like a hospital in the future, but divine. Clean skin meant survival, meant grace, meant a chance to sleep through the night without fever dreams or skin welts or whispers at your window. Clean, in the plague years, was a feeling, a flicker of control, a defiance, a prayer with soap. Eventually, you sit back up and walk along the field's edge. You spot a scarecrow dressed in what looks like a plague doctor's robe, beaked mask and all. Someone's version of a ward, perhaps, or a joke. You can't tell anymore. You smile anyway. As you return toward town, a gust of wind sends a burst of lavender toward you. Somewhere, someone has burned it again. You pass a window with clean linens fluttering. You spot a woman throwing lime powder onto her threshold. Still trying, still scrubbing away at chaos, still believing in soap and fire and herbs. And for a while longer, so do you. The stars are thinning now, faint against the rolling haze of smoke and dust from town chimneys. You tread along the path's edge, the dirt underfoot packed from wagon wheels and bare feet. The wind has a bitter taste tonight, like metal and ashes. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then falls silent. In front of you, a man stumbles out of a doorway, swaying slightly, clutching a cloth-wrapped bundle. You pause, stepping to the shadows. He mutters to himself and moves off into the gloom, toward the river. You watch him go, the bundle limp in his arms. You know better than to follow. Instead, you head toward the apothecary's alley, once a street of colourful jars and grinding mortars, now dim and shuttered, with herbs drying like ghosts from upper windows. One door is still open, casting amber light onto the cobbles. You move closer, and inside, a woman arranges small clay pots along a shelf, each labelled in a careful, spidery script: camphor, myrrh, bear fat, goose grease. She doesn't look up as you step in, just says, "Not for the dying. I won't waste good oil." Charming customer service, you think. You nod once and hover near the doorway. The shelves are crowded with strange and wonderful things. Preserved frog legs in vinegar, dried rose petals, powdered horn of, hopefully not unicorn. There's a thick jar labelled mummy dust. That's not a nickname. Wealthier clients believed ground-up bits of Egyptian mummies could ward off death, which is ironic, if you think about it too long. Historians still debate whether this practice was purely symbolic or if people genuinely believed it had healing power. Either way, someone made a killing off it. Literally. She finally looks up, studying you with the bored eyes of someone who's seen far too much. "You look clean enough," she says, and hands you a thimble-sized vial. Lavender oil. Rub it under the nose. Blocks out the stink. You do as you're told. It helps. This entire plague has turned the nose into a battleground. Scent is everything. both signal and defense. People wear nosegays, dab vinegar under the nostrils, even burn aromatic woods indoors to sweeten the humours. If something smells foul, superstition says it's dangerous. If it smells nice, maybe it can save you. The logic isn't sound, but in times like these, comfort trumps clarity. You leave a coin behind and step out again. On the wall beside the shop, someone has painted a crude drawing of death riding a horse, skeletal, with exaggerated teeth. Below it, in Latin, a warning: cleanliness is godliness. You wonder if that's new, or if it's always been there and no one noticed until now. Farther down the lane, you catch the sound of a heated argument between neighbours. One accuses the other of not washing his hands after feeding the pigs. The other swears he did, with wine, no less. Good wine. "That's better than your ratty well water," he shouts. You can't help but smile. Even now, hand washing's a point of pride. It's true, though. Hand washing isn't common practice. Not like it will be centuries from now. But some people try. Those who can afford water, soap, and time. And those who believe it might matter. You find a public fountain nearby, stone and moss-covered, with a sluggish trickle of brown-tinged water. Still, a woman fills a jug there, careful not to spill. You watch her dip a rag into it and scrub her son's face, tenderly, like he's a prince. You sit on the edge, cupping water in your hands. It's gritty, tastes like rust and mud, but it's wet, and it's something. Your reflection wobbles. You barely recognize yourself anymore. Hair tangled, skin sallow, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But there's still something human there. Still something that wants to be clean. Not just from dirt, but from everything. Fear, grief, guilt, memory. You wipe your hands on your tunic and stand. Across the square is a laundry stall where washerwomen beat garments against flat stones, their rhythm steady and grim. Most towns have one communal wash point, often near rivers or wells. Soap is made from animal fat and ashes. It works, more or less, but leaves clothes smelling like smoked bacon. One of the women catches your gaze and nods toward a steaming bucket. "Want your cloak done?" she asks, already reaching for it. You hand it over. While you wait, you listen to their chatter. They talk of scabs, rashes, strange coloured boils, and which vinegar works best to clean them out. They laugh at a noblewoman who sent her lace chemise for washing, already covered in lye burns because her maid tried a stronger bleach. They talk of babies born too small and men who cough blood into their sleeves. They are mothers, widows, lovers, and healers. Their hands are raw and red, but their eyes are steady. One sings a work song, low and rhythmic. It almost sounds like thunder on cloth. When your cloak is handed back, it's warm and damp and smells like rosemary ash. You slip it on and feel the weight settle over your shoulders. A bell chimes from the cathedral tower, long and slow. Midnight. The city exhales. You wander again, past homes with white crosses on the doors, marked by plague. Some with prayer scrolls nailed beside them, others with bottles of vinegar swinging on ropes above the threshold. A ritual of cleansing, or a warning. Someone's drawn a chalk circle around their house, with symbols at the corners. You don't cross it. In a side alley, you find a young man scrubbing his hands with sand and what looks like lemon juice. It stings, but it works, he mutters. He notices you and adds, "Better than dying like my cousin did. Black all over. Smelled like smoke before he even burned." You nod and move on. You pass a row of statues, once saints, now wearing cloth masks. Someone's tied them on, like a joke or a prayer. You aren't sure which. At the base of one, a bucket full of crushed garlic sits open, flies buzzing around it. Garlic was said to purify blood. People ate it, wore it, rubbed it on their feet. Some believed it repelled the plague. Others simply liked the way it overpowered every other smell. You pluck a clove and tuck it into your belt. Why not? Above you, a window opens. Someone tosses out a basin of water. It hits the street with a splash. You just miss it. You look up and laugh. The person mutters, "Sorry," and slams the shutters. Back on the main road, you spot a group of children playing near a covered well. They chant a rhyme you don't recognize. It sounds cheerful, but the words, something about roses and ashes and falling down. You stop. It's strange how children keep playing, keep singing, even as death sits at every doorstep. And you keep walking, keep searching, not for safety, not anymore, but for a kind of clean that can't be scrubbed off with soap. A ritual of the mind, a baptism of the soul, something that might smell faintly of lavender and lemon and old regret. You don't find it, not yet, but you're close. You move deeper into the winding lanes where the town's edges begin to fray, where dirt paths replace cobblestones and wooden shacks lean precariously against one another like weary travelers. The air grows cooler, but the heavy scent of smoke and decay clings stubbornly to everything. You find yourself in front of a modest home, its faded door hanging slightly askew. Inside, a small fire sputters in the hearth, its smoke weaving through the cramped space. An old woman sits hunched over a cauldron bubbling with dark liquid. She stirs carefully, adding sprigs of rue and handfuls of dried lavender. You recognize the herbs. They've been the town's reluctant protectors, whispered about as shields against sickness. The old woman looks up and offers a tired smile, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Smoke cleanses," she says simply. "Keeps the bad spirits and sickness away. Or so we hope." Smoke, you realize, is everywhere these days. People burn juniper, rosemary, sage, anything that might drive out the plague's invisible menace. The smell is pungent, biting at your nostrils, but somehow it feels like a blanket against the creeping dread. Historians still argue whether smoke truly helped prevent illness, or if it was mostly an act of psychological comfort, a way for people to claim some control when everything else was slipping away. The woman offers you a bundle of dried herbs wrapped in cloth. You accept, feeling the rough texture against your skin. She tells you to hang it by your door, to breathe in its scent when the night feels too close. You nod, thinking about the rituals people cling to, no matter how fragile or fanciful. You step back outside, the weight of the herb bundle strange and grounding. As you continue through the town, you notice small piles of ashes outside homes, sometimes scattered with salt or crushed garlic. These offerings, you realize, are part of an unspoken language of protection, symbols as old as fear itself. In a narrow alley, you stumble upon a makeshift laundry area where women beat soiled clothes against stones. The water they use is cold and murky, but they scrub tirelessly, whispering prayers between their breaths. One woman laughs softly and remarks, "Cleanliness keeps the devil at bay." It's a saying you've heard before, but here it carries a desperate weight. Nearby, you see a child playing with a wooden hoop, dirt smudged and smiling despite the surrounding gloom. You watch as a man passes by, carrying a heavy bucket of water from the well. His hands are rough, cracked from endless labor. He pauses to wash his face, rubbing vigorously, as if scrubbing could erase more than just dirt. The ritual of washing feels less like hygiene and more like a form of armor, a fragile defense against an enemy you cannot see. Soap, scarce and precious, is hoarded like treasure. Vinegar and herbs are used not just for scent, but as supposed shields against the plague's wrath. As night deepens, you find yourself near the town's well, where people gather quietly, their faces pale and drawn. The well's water is a lifeline, but also a source of anxiety. Contamination is a whispered fear, but there's no alternative. You listen as an old man recounts tales of past plagues and strange cures, bloodletting, leeches, even wearing masks stuffed with aromatic herbs. These stories blend history and superstition, fact and folklore. It's difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. The old man's voice lowers to a whisper. They say the plague doesn't spread through air, but through bad humors. Still, we wear these masks, hoping the scents will protect us. You recall the iconic beaked masks plague doctors wore, filled with herbs and spices to filter the air. Some historians argue these masks offered little real protection, while others believe they may have reduced exposure to airborne pathogens. The crowd disperses quietly as the hour grows late. You are left alone by the well, staring into the dark water. The surface ripples softly, reflecting the distant flicker of candlelight from shuttered windows. You think about how hygiene in this time was not just about cleanliness, but about survival, belief, and hope. The desperate rituals, the harsh scrubbing, the fragrant smoke, they are all echoes of a society grasping for control in chaos. You pull your cloak tighter, the herb bundles swinging at your side, and begin your slow walk back through the town's sleeping streets. The world may be filled with filth and fear, but even here, amidst the shadow of death, the human spirit clings to the promise of cleansing, both of the body and the soul. The dawn creeps in with a pale, hesitant light that barely warms the chilled streets. You awaken in a humble chamber, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and old wood. Outside, the clatter of market stalls beginning to stir cuts through the quiet, vendors calling out wares, the shuffle of carts, and the low murmur of townsfolk exchanging news. You step outside, the chill morning air sharp on your skin. The sun's light reveals a town still marred by the grime of long months under siege by the plague. Yet, amid the bleakness, life pulses stubbornly forward. People carry buckets of water, wash clothes on stones by the river, and sweep doorsteps with bundles of twigs. You approach the market, where a vendor displays rough loaves of bread, jars of honey, and bundles of herbs. The smell of fresh bread is a rare comfort. Nearby, a woman sells soap made from rendered animal fat and ashes, a precious commodity these days. You watch as a mother buys a small bar, carefully tucking it into her basket as if it were gold. The practice of soap making is laborious and expensive. Most people rely on ashes and water, or fragrant oils, to cleanse themselves. Historians still argue whether the scarcity of soap contributed significantly to the spread of disease, or if other factors played larger roles. In the market, you overhear whispers of plague doctors traveling through towns, dressed in their eerie costumes with long beaked masks filled with herbs. Some view them as saviors, others as harbingers of doom. The masks were meant to filter miasma, the bad air thought to carry disease. You wonder if the scent of lavender and camphor could truly mask the stench of death and decay. A boy runs past you, his face smeared with dirt but his eyes bright. He chases a chicken, laughing as it flaps wildly, scattering feathers like snow. Children still find moments of joy, even in such desperate times. You make your way to a communal bathhouse, where a handful of brave souls gather despite the risk. The water is heated over a wood fire, steam rising in thick swirls. Bathing is rare but cherished, a fleeting escape from filth and fear. People soak, wash, and share stories in low voices. The bathhouse serves as both sanctuary and social hub. Yet, fear of contagion keeps many away. The idea of communal bathing when plague lingers is a gamble few dare take. Some believe that water itself can spread disease. Others think heat and steam might purify body and soul. You join the line, feeling the warmth seep into your bones. The water is muddy but comforting. You scrub yourself with coarse cloth and a small piece of soap. Careful but eager to wash away the grime and anxiety. A woman nearby hums a melancholy tune, her voice soft and steady. Her hands move rhythmically, scrubbing a child's tangled hair. You notice her eyes flicker with sorrow beneath the gentle smile. Bathing in medieval times was about more than hygiene. It was ritual, a moment of cleansing not just for the body, but for the spirit. Yet, it was also a luxury many couldn't afford or dared not risk. You exit the bathhouse feeling lighter, cleaner. The scent of herbs clings faintly to your skin. You wonder how long this brief comfort will last before the harsh reality of the plague creeps back. As you walk back through the marketplace, you see a poster nailed to a post, an edict from the city council. It orders the disposal of waste outside city walls, the burning of infected clothing, and forbids the gathering of large crowds. Hygiene, law, and fear are intertwined in a desperate attempt to stem the tide of death. You pocket the notice and continue onward, the weight of the day settling slowly. Despite the grime, the fear, and the constant presence of death, the small acts of cleanliness, the rituals of washing and burning, show a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, order can be restored. And somewhere deep inside, you hope that future days will bring more than just survival, that they will bring healing. You trudge through the narrow alleys, where refuse piles up like small mountains, and the stench of rot clings stubbornly to the air. The plague has not just ravaged bodies, but also the fragile systems of cleanliness and waste management. Garbage heaps sit ignored in the streets, attracting rats that scurry between broken cobblestones, their tiny paws carrying unseen horrors. It's said that rats and the fleas they harbour are carriers of the deadly plague. But few in the town grasp this truth. Instead, they blame the air, bad humours, or divine punishment. Historians still argue whether the spread was mostly due to fleas on rats or if other factors played significant roles. Either way, the presence of vermin in filthy streets is a grim reality. You peer into a gutter clogged with stagnant water and refuse, a breeding ground for all manner of disease. A woman leans over, scooping out water with a worn bucket. She murmurs a prayer under her breath, hoping to keep sickness at bay. Nearby, children play despite the dangers, their laughter ringing out, a sharp contrast to the grime and despair. The town's lack of organised waste disposal is a major problem. People dump garbage wherever convenient, streets, riverbanks, even inside the city walls. You spot piles of animal bones, rotting food, broken pottery, and discarded clothing. In wealthier homes, servants dispose of waste more diligently, tossing refuse into pits or carting it away. But even these efforts cannot fully contain the filth, and those with money are not immune to the plague's reach. You pass a heap of discarded clothing rumoured to belong to the recently deceased. Some believe burning these items wards off disease. Others think it's a cruel ritual to sever ties with the dead. The practice varies widely, reflecting the patchwork of beliefs and customs surrounding hygiene and disease. Nearby, a man uses a broom made from twigs to sweep his doorstep. His movements are slow, deliberate, an attempt to keep his small patch of ground free from dust and debris. You note the stark difference between his neat doorstep and the chaos beyond. The scene brings to mind the phrase often whispered during these times: clean streets, clean souls. It's more than a saying. It's a desperate hope that cleanliness might stave off death. Yet, hygiene was not simply a matter of sweeping and washing. It was bound up in social status, religious belief, and available resources. Nobles had access to baths, clean clothing, and even primitive sewage systems. The poor, by contrast, lived in crowded, unsanitary conditions where disease thrived. You glance toward the churchyard, where a funeral procession slowly advances. Even in death, hygiene and sanitation remain fraught with difficulty. Bodies are hastily buried, often in mass graves, fueling fear and superstition. You overhear a debate among local clergy about whether the plague is punishment for sins or a natural illness. Their sermons urge repentance, confession, and prayer, but also practical measures: burning infected possessions, isolating the sick. You pause at a fountain where townsfolk draw water, watching as a woman dips her jug carefully. The water looks clear, but you wonder if it's truly safe. Contamination is a constant worry, but the options are limited. You recall a quirky detail from a traveling merchant. Some people carry small cloth pouches filled with aromatic herbs, like a medieval air freshener, to mask the stench and, supposedly, keep sickness away. Whether these pouches did any good is debated, but they certainly added colour to the otherwise bleak streets. As you continue your journey, you notice a sense of resilience amid the decay. People do what they can to keep clean, to protect themselves and their loved ones. They wash their hands with vinegar, cover their faces with cloths, and avoid crowds when possible. The plague has brought misery and death, but also a new awareness of hygiene's importance. Even here, amid the filth and fear, you glimpse the fragile beginnings of public health measures. You shudder slightly as a rat scurries past your feet, disappearing into a crack in the wall. You remind yourself that this fight against disease is as much about small daily acts, sweeping, washing, burning, as it is about grand cures. And with that thought, you press onward, stepping carefully through the muddy streets. As midday sun filters through the narrow gaps between timber-framed houses, you find yourself in a bustling apothecary's shop. The air inside is thick with a blend of dried herbs, oils, and the sharp tang of vinegar. Bottles of all shapes and sizes line the shelves, filled with strange concoctions, some bubbling faintly, others layered with sediment. The apothecary, a middle-aged man with a kindly but tired face, is mixing a paste with ground roots and crushed flowers. He explains, almost apologetically, that these remedies are meant to cleanse the humours and soothe the skin lesions caused by the plague. You watch as he hands a small jar to a nervous customer, warning that it won't cure the disease but might ease suffering. Medicine during the plague was a patchwork of tradition and superstition. Physicians used bleeding, leeches, and herbal poultices. You remember hearing about a remedy involving crushed pearls and honey, supposedly to purify the blood. Historians still argue whether any treatments truly had medicinal value, or simply placebo effects rooted in hope. You notice a peculiar jar labelled bezoar stone, a rumoured antidote believed to neutralise poison and sickness. The apothecary tells you it's a precious and rare substance, harvested from the stomachs of wild goats, a cure so magical that some nobles pay fortunes for it. Outside the shop, a cart loaded with bundles of lavender and rosemary passes by, its driver calling out the herb's supposed powers to purify air and repel disease. People clutch small bunches, holding them close to their faces like talismans against the invisible threat. You move on to a public square where a group of townsfolk gather to watch a demonstration. A traveling healer performs a ritual, lighting incense, reciting prayers, and applying a greenish salve to a volunteer's arm. The healer's methods blend herbal knowledge with spiritual belief, a blend common in medieval medicine. The role of faith and ritual in hygiene and health cannot be overstated. People believed that sin, uncleanliness, and spiritual impurity invited disease. Washing the body was both a physical and spiritual act, a plea for divine protection. You recall a fringe tidbit. Some people wore small sacks filled with dried toads or snake skins, thinking these could absorb evil or sickness. It's strange to imagine, but these beliefs reflect a deep desire to find control amidst chaos. Nearby, children chase each other with wooden swords, their laughter a sharp contrast to the serious atmosphere. You catch a glimpse of a mother washing her baby's face with a damp cloth, careful not to scare the child. The apothecary shop is more than just a place for cures. It's a hub of community and knowledge sharing. Here, people exchange advice on cleanliness, recipes for herbal baths, and ways to fumigate homes. You note how even in a time of fear, information flows through small networks. You pause outside a church, watching as a priest sprinkles holy water on the congregation. The ritual is both comfort and warning. Cleanse your souls, but also your bodies. Hygiene is as much a moral imperative as a practical one. As afternoon wanes, you think about how hygiene during the Black Plague was a tangled weave of medicine, superstition, faith, and daily survival. The remedies might not have stopped the disease, but they gave people hope and a sense of agency. You tuck the herb bundle tighter under your cloak and step away from the apothecary's shop, the mingled scents lingering in your nose. The struggle against filth and fear continues, and every small act of washing, fumigating, and cleansing is a battle won against despair. You stroll into a quiet courtyard where a group of monks tend to a modest herb garden. The scent of thyme, sage, and lavender mingles with the faint earthiness of freshly turned soil. Monks have long been custodians of medical knowledge, preserving ancient texts and preparing remedies from plants grown in these tranquil spaces. You watch as one monk carefully plucks a sprig of wormwood, explaining it's believed to have protective properties against plague. They grind the leaves into powders and infuse teas, sharing them with the sick and the fearful alike. The garden is both a sanctuary and a pharmacy, a place where nature and faith intertwine. Monastic hygiene practices were surprisingly advanced for their time. Many monasteries had running water, latrines, and dedicated bathing areas, though these were more about ritual purity than germ theory, which would come centuries later. Historians still argue whether monastic cleanliness contributed to lower disease rates compared to townsfolk. You remember the fringe belief some monks held, that certain herbs, like rue or garlic, could ward off evil spirits or plague demons. These ideas shaped hygiene and medicine in profound ways, blurring the line between physical and spiritual health. Nearby, an infirmary room hums with quiet activity. Monks bandage wounds, feed patients broth, and chant prayers. The air is heavy with the smell of vinegar and herbs, but also with the palpable weight of sorrow and hope. You recall hearing about the plague water some monks prepared. distilled herbs and vinegar intended as a tonic and disinfectant. Whether it helped or harmed is debated, but it's clear that hygiene here meant more than just cleanliness. It was a holistic approach to health. Outside the monastery walls, townsfolk look on with a mix of reverence and suspicion. Monks were sometimes accused of hoarding knowledge or being too isolated. Yet, their gardens and clean spaces were glimpses of what good hygiene could be. You watch as a novice monk gently washes his hands in a basin, the water carrying away grime and fatigue. This simple act, repeated countless times a day, is a quiet rebellion against the chaos outside. Monasteries also acted as centers for educating the public about health, urging better sanitation and care. They promoted hand washing and cleanliness during illness. Even if the reasons were more spiritual than scientific, you ponder how the idea of hygiene during the Black Plague was inseparable from belief systems. Cleanliness was not just physical, but moral and spiritual, a way to show devotion and seek protection. As you leave the courtyard, the sun dipping low, you feel the contrast between this serene place and the grim streets beyond. The monks' gardens and rituals offer a fragile hope, a glimpse of order amid the turmoil. You tuck a sprig of lavender into your pocket, a small reminder of the quiet power of nature and faith working hand in hand. And with that, you step back into the noisy, messy world of plague-ridden streets, carrying the lessons of the monastery close. You push through a crowded marketplace where vendors shout their wares, and the mix of scents, fresh bread, ripe fruit, and the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies hits you all at once. Here, the realities of medieval hygiene clash with everyday survival. The plague has changed how people gather, but life carries on with stubborn persistence. You watch a butcher at his stall, carving meat from a hanging carcass. Blood drips onto the wooden table, mingling with sawdust and stray hairs. Sanitation is minimal. The idea of sterilizing tools or surfaces is centuries away. Historians still argue whether meat markets contributed significantly to the plague's spread, but the conditions certainly didn't help. Amid the chaos, some vendors try to clean their goods with vinegar or sprinkle sand on the floors to absorb spills. A woman sells fragrant herbs, urging customers to take a bundle to ward off disease. Her customers grasp them tightly, a mix of hope and desperation in their eyes. You overhear whispers about a plague mask worn by some healers, long beak-like noses stuffed with herbs, believed to filter out miasma or bad air. It's a strange and eerie sight, but a real attempt at hygiene and protection. Children dart between stalls, their feet bare, faces smudged with dirt. Their resilience is impressive, but their hygiene habits leave much to be desired. A mother wipes a child's face with a damp cloth, then hands him a piece of stale bread. You spot a street cleaner sweeping the cobblestones, a thankless job made harder by constant crowds and litter. The sweeping sends up clouds of dust, which some believe carries disease. It's one of many contradictions in medieval hygiene practices. Nearby, a water trough serves both people and animals. The water is murky, and you wonder how many diseases lurk beneath the surface. Access to clean water was a luxury for many, shaping hygiene habits and health outcomes. You remember reading about medieval public latrines, often just holes in the ground shared by many. The smell is awful, but the facilities were crucial for managing waste in crowded cities. Still, contamination of water supplies was common, fueling outbreaks. Amid the grimness, you note some inventive attempts at cleanliness. A vendor uses boiling water to clean utensils, and a few stalls have rough wooden barriers to separate raw meat from bread. You also recall the fringe notion that bathing too often might weaken the body's defenses, a belief that led some to avoid washing altogether during plague outbreaks. It seems counterintuitive now, but it reflects the complex attitudes toward hygiene. As the market bustle continues around you, you realize that hygiene during the Black Plague was a balancing act between fear and necessity, tradition and innovation, cleanliness and practicality. You leave the market with a new appreciation for the courage it took to live, work, and stay clean in such perilous times. Every small effort to maintain hygiene was a tiny rebellion against the overwhelming forces of disease and decay. You wander into a crowded household where the smells of cooking and unwashed bodies mix thickly in the air. Inside, the family struggles to keep the home clean, a difficult task with many mouths to feed and little water to spare. The hearth glows warmly, but the comfort it offers is shadowed by worry and exhaustion. You see a mother washing clothes in a wooden tub, scrubbing linen against a rough board. Soap is rare, usually made from animal fat and ashes, and reserved for the wealthier few. Most people rely on water and vigorous rubbing to clean their garments. In wealthier homes, laundry happens in larger vats and sometimes includes scented oils or herbs. The rich also change clothes more frequently, an important factor in personal hygiene and preventing lice infestations. Historians still argue how much laundering truly affected disease spread, but it was certainly a step toward cleanliness. You notice a small basin by the door where family members wash their hands before meals. Hand washing was encouraged, especially after using the latrine, but many lacked the resources or time. Vinegar or scented water was often used as a cheap disinfectant. In one corner, you spot a chamber pot, an everyday necessity in crowded medieval homes. Emptying and cleaning these pots was unpleasant but crucial. You grimace as you think about the smells and dangers of improper waste disposal. The family's daily routine includes sweeping floors with straw brooms, airing out bedding, and fumigating rooms with herbs. These actions reflect an awareness that dirt and bad smells were linked to illness, even if the scientific reasons were unknown. You recall a quirky detail. Some people sprinkle crushed alum or salt in their homes to cleanse the air and surfaces. The effectiveness is uncertain, but the practice reveals a proactive approach to hygiene. Children play nearby, their clothes patched and worn. You watch as the mother gently wipes a child's face with a damp cloth, trying to keep grime at bay despite the hardships. You overhear a debate among family members about whether bathing is healthy or risky. Some say warm baths open the pores to disease, while others argue for the soothing and cleansing benefits. Historians still debate how these conflicting beliefs influenced hygiene habits. You catch a glimpse of a small wash basin in the corner, where a young boy rinses his face and hands. It's a moment of quiet care amid the bustle of daily survival. You reflect on how hygiene was deeply intertwined with social status. The wealthy had more resources and privacy to maintain cleanliness, while the poor often lived in cramped, dirty quarters. As you prepare to leave the home, you notice a small pot of lavender on the windowsill, another nod to the power of scent in medieval hygiene. It's a tiny comfort, a reminder that even in difficult times, people sought freshness and purity. You step back into the street, carrying with you a sense of the resilience and resourcefulness needed to keep clean when the odds were stacked against you. You find yourself wandering through the labyrinthine alleys of a medieval city, where the smell of waste and damp stone hangs heavy. The streets are narrow, and refuse piles up in corners, creating breeding grounds for rats and insects, unwelcome companions during the Black Plague. You notice that most houses lack proper sewage systems, and chamber pots are routinely emptied into the streets. People avoid stepping into the murky puddles of mixed waste and rainwater. But accidents happen, and contamination spreads easily. Public bathhouses, once common gathering spots for hygiene and socializing, have fallen out of favor. The plague's arrival instilled fear that these warm, crowded places might be breeding grounds for illness. You recall that some cities even closed their bathhouses, believing that washing could open the pores to deadly miasmas. Yet, despite this, hygiene practices varied widely. Some people continued to bathe regularly, while others avoided water entirely, fearing it would weaken their bodies. Historians still argue whether avoiding bathing helped or worsened plague outcomes. You overhear merchants gossiping about plague doctors wearing peculiar outfits, long black coats, gloves, and that infamous beaked mask stuffed with aromatic herbs. These doctors believed foul air carried disease, and their outfits were an attempt at protection, a primitive form of personal hygiene gear. You notice women carrying basins of water to wash the streets, a grim and largely ineffective effort to keep the city cleaner. A child chases after a chicken, its feathers ruffling as it scampers through dirt and straw. You remember a fringe practice where people burned sulfur or herbs to purify the air, a kind of fumigation meant to cleanse invisible poison. It sounds odd now, but in a world without microscopes, smell was the best indicator of health risk. Rats scurry in the shadows, unwelcome but unavoidable. They carry fleas, the real culprits behind the plague's spread. People knew nothing of this link, but their instinct to avoid filth was a step in the right direction. You pass a latrine pit open to the street, its stench overpowering. You wonder how anyone could live so close and not fall ill instantly. Still, these unsanitary conditions were typical, and people adapted as best they could. You see a small group gathered around a public fountain, washing hands and faces. Access to clean water was limited, and many had to walk miles to fetch it. This scarcity shaped hygiene routines profoundly. You think about how medieval cities were a patchwork of cleanliness and filth, hope and despair. Hygiene was a daily challenge, constrained by knowledge, resources, and fear. As you move on, you glimpse a patch of blue sky above the rooftops. A reminder that even in the darkest times, there were moments of fresh air and light, brief respites in a world shadowed by disease. You carry the image of the crowded, messy streets with you, a testament to the complex dance between human life and the relentless plague. You find yourself stepping inside a grand cathedral, where the scent of incense and candle wax fills the air. The place is dimly lit, with shafts of light filtering through stained glass windows, depicting saints and miracles. Here, faith and hygiene intersect in curious ways. You observe the ritual washing of hands before communion, a symbolic act that also served a practical purpose in reducing germs, even if they had no word for such things. Holy water fonts stand near entrances, inviting worshippers to cleanse their hands and faces before entering this sacred space. The clergy are careful to maintain cleanliness within the cathedral, knowing that disease could spread quickly among congregations. Some cathedrals had elaborate systems of water channels and stone basins to facilitate ritual washing, which also helped with general hygiene. You overhear a choir boy whisper about holy relics that were believed to protect against illness. Pieces of cloth, bones, or even dust touched by saints. Pilgrims came from far and wide to touch or kiss these relics, hoping for divine protection against the plague. Historians still argue whether the crowds gathering in churches during plague outbreaks helped spread the disease or offered solace that was worth the risk. The tension between faith and fear is palpable here. In one corner, you notice a small infirmary area staffed by monks or nuns tending to the sick. They wash wounds with blessed water and apply poultices made from sacred herbs. This blending of spirituality and practical care was central to medieval hygiene. You think about the paradox. Churches were both places of refuge and potential hotspots for contagion. The rituals of cleansing were meant to purify the soul, but they often involved physical contact that might transmit disease. You glimpse a holy water stop, small basin for dipping fingers, where worshippers ritually purify themselves. You realize this simple gesture was one of the few widespread hygiene practices accessible to common folk. You also recall stories of some clergy refusing to abandon their flocks during the plague, choosing to care for the sick despite personal risk. Their commitment to hygiene and health was both spiritual and practical. The cathedral's vast stone floors are swept regularly, and the air is kept free of excessive filth compared to the streets outside. It's a stark contrast to the chaos of everyday life in the city. You hear a choir softly singing in the background. Their voices a soothing balm amid the fear and death outside. It's a reminder that hygiene during the plague was about more than just cleanliness. It was about hope, care, and community. You leave the cathedral with a sense of reverence, carrying the echoes of prayers and the image of holy rituals dedicated to health and healing. You find yourself in the cramped quarters of a plague hospital, a grim place filled with the sick and dying. The air is thick with the smell of herbs, sweat, and something darker, fear itself. Here, hygiene is both a desperate hope and an impossible dream. Nurses and attendants wear simple masks or scarves over their faces, trying to shield themselves from the invisible enemy. They change linen when they can, wash wounds with vinegar, and fumigate rooms with smoke. These efforts are rudimentary but crucial attempts to control infection. You notice that beds are often shared or placed too close together, a practice that today would be called a public health nightmare. But the scarcity of space and resources left few options. There's a certain quiet desperation in the way attendants work, gentle touches mixed with hurried movements. They clean soiled sheets and try to keep water and food nearby, though many patients are too weak to care for themselves. Historians still argue how effective these plague hospitals were. Some suggest they slowed transmission by isolating the sick, while others believe their overcrowding only hastened the disease. You spot a healer mixing poultices from herbs, some common, like rosemary and thyme, others more exotic and dubious. The belief was that strong smells and certain plants could drive away disease, a recurring theme in plague-era hygiene. You hear the soft murmur of prayers, a constant presence offering comfort when medicine could not. Spiritual care was intertwined with physical hygiene, each reinforcing the other. You recall that many hospitals were run by religious orders, blending faith and care. These institutions were among the first attempts at organized healthcare and hygiene during epidemics. You also learn of a quirky practice. Some attendants sprinkled crushed pearls or ground bones into the air, believing these powders purified the space. While ineffective, it reveals the creativity and desperation in combating the plague. You see a patient's grimy hands being washed gently with scented water, a rare moment of tenderness amid the chaos. These small acts of care were sometimes the only comfort left. You notice that attendants themselves fell ill often, highlighting the limits of medieval hygiene knowledge and protective gear. Despite the grim setting, you find moments of humanity. A nurse sharing a smile, a patient clutching a loved one's hand. Hygiene was not just about cleanliness, but about preserving dignity. As you leave the hospital, you carry with you a deeper understanding of how hygiene, care, and hope intertwined in the darkest hours of the Black Plague. You step into the quiet courtyard of a monastery, a place of calm far from the chaos of the city. Here, hygiene is woven into the rhythm of daily life, shaped by faith, ritual, and the need for order amid uncertainty. Monks move slowly, their robes brushing the stone floors as they head to the lavatorium, an area dedicated to washing hands and faces before meals and prayers. The water flows from a simple stone basin, cold but refreshing. You observe the careful routines, hands scrubbed thoroughly, faces rinsed, and towels shared sparingly but with care. Cleanliness is seen as a form of spiritual purity, a way to prepare the body for worship and work. The monastery gardens provide fresh herbs, used both in cooking and medicine. You watch a gardener picking rosemary and lavender, plants believed to have protective and cleansing properties. These herbs often found their way into washes, ointments, or even incense. You hear the soft chanting of monks, their voices blending with the distant chirping of birds. The peaceful environment contrasts sharply with the stench and disorder outside monastery walls. Historians still debate how monasteries' hygiene practices influenced wider medieval society. They were centers of learning and health, but their influence was limited by social and geographic boundaries. You note that monastic latrines were carefully designed, often built over flowing water to carry waste away. This early form of sanitation was far ahead of most medieval cities. You learn of the practice of washing days when monks would bathe, usually weekly, an event surrounded by ritual and community bonding. Bathing was both a physical and spiritual cleansing. In the infirmary, monks care for the sick, using herbal remedies alongside prayers. Their approach is holistic, blending hygiene, faith, and compassion. You recall a quirky story about some monks experimenting with early forms of antiseptics, like alcohol-based tinctures, although their knowledge was limited and experimental. The monks' disciplined hygiene routines contrast with the chaos outside, offering a glimpse of medieval attempts to control disease through order and ritual. You notice that even the simple act of lighting a fire indoors helped keep dampness and mold at bay. Another small but effective hygiene practice. As you leave the monastery, the calm stillness stays with you, a reminder that in the darkest times, places of quiet care and cleanliness offered hope and healing. You find yourself in a bustling marketplace, alive with the sounds of haggling and the mingling aromas of fresh bread, spices, and unwashed bodies. Here, hygiene is a constant negotiation between commerce, survival, and public health. Stalls overflow with fruits and vegetables, but the open-air setup exposes food to dust, flies, and stray animals. Vendors use water sparingly, often just wiping down surfaces with cloths or rinsing produce in a single basin. You watch a fishmonger handle slippery catches without gloves, then reach for coins exchanged from customers' hands. The cycle of touch and trade makes it easy for germs to travel. Though medieval people didn't understand this fully, historians still debate how much marketplaces contributed to the spread of plague and other diseases. But the close contact and unsanitary conditions certainly didn't help. You see a street cleaner sweeping the area, gathering scraps into a cart that will be hauled away. It's a small but vital effort to keep the marketplace livable. A vendor offers vinegar-soaked cloths to customers as rudimentary disinfectants. Vinegar was one of the few known agents believed to kill bad air and germs. You spot rats darting between barrels and undercarts, their presence unwelcome but a constant challenge. Rats, of course, played a major role in spreading plague via fleas. Nearby, a group of children play, their hands sticky from sweets sold in the market. Their mothers scrub faces and hands with damp cloths, trying to ward off illness despite the limited resources. You remember that some cities tried to regulate market hygiene, setting rules about waste disposal and cleanliness. Enforcement was patchy, but it reflected growing awareness. You overhear a merchant mention the use of perfumes and scented powders to mask odors, an early form of personal hygiene and social signaling. You also recall a quirky custom. Some vendors kept small animals, like cats or ferrets, to control the rat population. These furry hunters were invaluable, even if not everyone appreciated their presence. You pass a public well where people draw water for drinking and cooking. Contamination was common, but access to clean water was a prized commodity. The market bustle continues unabated, a microcosm of medieval life's complexity, full of risk, resilience, and human connection. You leave with a vivid image of the marketplace's sensory chaos, understanding how hygiene was a daily struggle shaped by environment, economy, and culture. You walk down a winding country lane, leaving the crowded city behind, and enter the quieter world of rural medieval life. Here, hygiene takes on a different rhythm, shaped by nature, farming, and simple routines. You notice farmhouses with thatched roofs and earthen floors, where animals often live close to people. Manure piles and animal waste are common sights, used as fertilizer, but also sources of contamination. Water comes from wells, streams, or rain catchments, and is often shared by humans and livestock alike. Bathing is infrequent, limited by cold water and scarce resources. You watch a woman washing clothes in a river, scrubbing linen against smooth stones. This outdoor washing is practical, though exposure to the elements often left clothes damp and less than fresh. Historians still argue how rural hygiene practices influenced disease spread compared to cities. The isolation helped slow infection, but limited medical knowledge and resources posed other risks. You hear the bleating of sheep and clucking of chickens, whose manure can attract flies, another vector for disease. Yet, animals were vital companions and providers. You see a rudimentary privy, a hole in the ground some distance from the house. It's a step up from open defecation, but still far from modern sanitation. You learn that many rural communities relied heavily on herbal remedies grown in gardens, used for washing wounds or soothing ailments. A child runs past carrying a wooden bowl filled with water, splashing some on their face, a rare gesture of personal hygiene. You recall a quirky rural tradition, hanging bundles of herbs above doorways and windows to ward off sickness, a folk practice blending superstition and hygiene. You notice smoke rising from hearth fires, not only for cooking, but also to keep insects at bay and dry damp air. Small but effective hygiene aids. You think about how rural life demanded self-reliance and ingenuity in hygiene, often relying on natural resources and passed down wisdom. As you stroll further, the wide open sky and fresh air seem a stark contrast to city grime, a reminder that environment deeply shaped medieval hygiene experiences. You carry with you the image of rural life, where simplicity and nature offered some protection, even if invisible threats lurked unseen. You return to the crowded city streets as night falls, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows against stone walls. The city's nighttime hygiene rituals reveal a different side of medieval life, one of caution, cleanups, and sometimes chaos. You watch as residents empty chamber pots from upper windows, the contents crashing into the street below. It's a messy, unavoidable practice that added to the city's foul odors and health hazards. City officials enforce curfews, not just for safety, but to control street cleanliness. Sweeping and waste removal happen mainly during daylight hours, leaving nighttime streets grim and slippery. You overhear complaints about rats and vermin, attracted by refuse and food scraps left out overnight. Pest control was rudimentary, relying on cats, traps, and sheer frustration. You observe street cleaners and night watchmen patrolling alleys, armed with brooms and lanterns, their job a mix of sanitation and security. They clear waste, extinguish fires, and keep an eye out for thieves. Historians still debate how effective these nighttime measures were at preventing disease spread, but they reveal a growing municipal concern for hygiene. You see taverns closing, with patrons hurriedly washing hands or faces before heading home. Public bathhouses shut their doors, leaving cleanliness to personal routines. You notice the faint scent of herbs hung from windows and doorways, early air fresheners meant to combat the city's pungent night air. You recall a curious custom where people sprinkled powdered sulfur or other fumigants to cleanse their homes at night, a method thought to purify the air. You think about how nighttime hygiene was less about washing and more about containment, controlling waste, pests, and odors until daylight. As you wander through silent, lamplit streets, you feel the tension between medieval city life's vitality and its persistent struggles with cleanliness. You leave with an understanding that medieval hygiene was a 24-hour battle, with nighttime bringing its own set of rituals and risks. You stand at the threshold of a medieval home, where the day's grime and worry slowly settle. As evening deepens, personal hygiene practices take on a quiet, intimate rhythm, shaped by modest means and simple comforts. You watch a family gather around a basin filled with warm water, sharing a ritual washing of hands and faces before the evening meal. Soap is rare and precious, so they rely on water and cloths, sometimes scented with herbs. Children's hair is brushed and combed, detangling knots while elders recount stories, the gentle motions doubling as care and cleanliness. This ritual calms the household, marking the transition from busy day to restful night. You observe the careful cleaning of teeth, not with modern brushes but with chew sticks, twigs from aromatic trees believed to freshen breath and protect gums. You hear the soft rustling of linen sheets being aired and prepared, an important step to ward off pests and keep bedding as fresh as possible. Historians still argue whether medieval people fully appreciated the health benefits of such personal hygiene routines, or if they were primarily about social norms and comfort. You glimpse the use of scented oils and powders, subtle fragrances meant to mask odors and offer a sense of cleanliness when washing was limited. You learn about the quirky belief that sleeping with a small pouch of herbs under your pillow could keep nightmares and illness away, blending hygiene with superstition. You notice the care taken with clothing. Woven fabrics were often layered and aired but seldom washed frequently, making scent management a crucial part of personal hygiene. You think about the resilience of medieval families, who found comfort and cleanliness in routine, despite the hardships of their time. You sense the fading day's worries as the household prepares to rest, their simple hygiene rituals offering both physical relief and emotional solace. You step back, carrying the warmth of this intimate moment, a final glimpse into how medieval people cared for themselves and their loved ones at day's end. Now, slowing the pace, the world softens around you. The faint glow of a candle flickers low, shadows retreating as you settle deeper into comfort. The rough textures of medieval life fade into a gentle calm. Your breath slows. The tension loosens. In this quiet space, the simple acts of washing, airing, and caring become whispers of peace. Though their world was filled with fear and hardship, their moments of cleanliness were also moments of hope. Fragile, but real. So, rest now, and carry this gentle history with you. Good night.